been a minute since I posted a video. Just want to give you guys an update. So the head has arrived, sitting there in that crate. The engine is supposed to be arriving, well, I said the short block should be done by the end of this week. So I hope to start doing some rebuild videos on the engine. So that would be the next thing. But in this video, I primarily want to talk about the paint and body work expectations for this car. I've got everything pretty much off the car that I want to get off. I've left the steering in place to be able to move the car into position. So first thing the body guy will have to do is take the steering wheel off and then remove the body from the chassis. And the expectation is that the chassis is going to get done first. I'm going to pick the chassis up and rebuild the suspension and drop the engine on the chassis as well while he's working on the body. So I'm going to dive into it here. All right, let's talk about painting considerations, colors, methods, things like that. So this car was made at two different factories. It was made at Foleshill until November of 1952, and then from November of 1952 to 54, they made it at Browns Lane. So that's important because the methods that they used, the colors that they used were different at the two factories. So if you're looking to be as original as possible to your ear, you have to be aware of what those differences are. At Foleshill, they had an offering of metallic style paints, and they actually used mother of pearl, which would be very expensive today to try to recreate. So a lot of people are just fine with using metallic flaking in the paint to kind of recreate that look. And then they got rid of those metallics and they moved to Browns Lane. Much to my disappointment, because I really do like the metallics, but unfortunately I'm trying to be somewhat original, so I'm gonna have to use one of the non-metallic paints. And right now I'm leaning towards what's called Battleship Gray. At one point I was leaning towards Birch Gray, but someone convinced me that it looked like primer, so I'm looking more at the darker Battleship Gray with a red interior. I think it's a really good look. So anyway, the primary difference between Foleshill and Browns Lane. At Foleshill, they did not paint on a rotisserie. In order to save time and money, they painted as much as they possibly could black. So the inside of the engine compartment would have been all black. The inside of the car, battery box, everything would have been black. And then also in the boots and the underside of the car as well, all black. And then they painted just the parts you could see the actual body color. And that was a nitrocellulose style paint. And then when they moved to Browns Lane, they were using a synthetic enamel style paint. And they also had rotisseries. So there's less things painted black. There are some things that are supposed to be black at Browns Lane, but generally speaking, all of the body is the body color. It became much easier for them to get all the hard to reach places painted the body color. So that's how they did it from 1952 on. Okay, so I'm not sure if I included this in the book review video that I did, but this is a great book. This is the Concours Judging Guide. It's an older version from 2018 by Bob Sheridan and Roger Payne. I've met Bob before, and I think Roger's in Australia, very knowledgeable. So in the back here, there's an appendix that gets into the different paint considerations at the different plants. So the first one gets into Foleshill. You can see all the components that are supposed to be painted black. And on the next page, it talks about Browns Lane and all the considerations there. If you have a Browns Lane car, you want to pay most attention to what was painted black. There were a few things that were painted black. Like for example, the petrol filler cover was still black. The spare wheel clamp, the tank, the splash shields, some sort of brackets for the wiper motors, throttle linkage, brake fluid supply tank, bonnet catch plate, and of course the chassis. So this is a great guide to make sure that you're following everything as they did in the factory. All right, so just a few observations on my car before it gets sent to the body shop. You want to do a thorough review before you send it to give them a nice scope of work. There's little things like for example, this doesn't quite sit flush. So those are the kinds of little details you want to get ironed out. Let's see here. The sills on this car are in really bad shape. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but let's see. Yeah, they're pretty rusted out. This is a very common thing. Thankfully, these are not structural sills. So really these, they're not providing any kind of structural advantage to the car, so taking them out is not that big of a deal. So I have replacement sills. You know, getting the door to close correctly is important. So these hinge plates, you can see that that one's pretty straight, but looking at this one, you can see it's kinked. So that was part of the reason why the door was not shutting properly. So that's definitely something I want you to look at. Let's see. At the front here, I think when the previous owner pulled the engine out, maybe his hoist pushed up against this front panel here and bent this. So this is definitely something we're gonna have to get repaired. You know, and some of it's hard to see, but there's a little bit of waves here in the body. You know, you want to have as straight of a line as possible running down the side of the car, which can be really hard to achieve. And this car is by no means perfect, but you know, really for its age, it's not in that bad a shape. Got a dent here. Somebody dropped a tool in the back of the boot. Yeah, you can probably see some of the waves there as well. So those are all the things I want to get addressed. And I'm going to provide him with diagrams of the car that show, you know, the imperfections that I found. Framework, I'm not going to get down there and show it to you, but there is some rust on the bottom of this portion of the chassis. And it's just on this side. And what's kind of a weird thing about the chassis is that it's not straight all the way. It kind of juts up here. And right at that point where it juts up is where the rust issue is. So I'm not able to put jack stands there. And so we're gonna go ahead and get that taken care of. Let's see what else. Yeah, you probably can't see on the camera, but that's a little wavy. You know, I took a magnet to the front to the car to see if there was any filler. I was not able to find very much filler. You know, it's not gonna stick here because these are lead. This was tacked in with lead. But yeah, so I mean, it really is in pretty good shape in that regard. Let's see here, for a car in the southeastern United States. Looking in here, I'm having some trouble with getting the emergency brake cable out, so that's one thing I still have to remove. Looking at the transmission mount, looks like they cut away here. I don't think that that's originally how it was. I will say, if I have to go with or if I decide to go with a 5-speed transmission, the guiding practice is to cut out a little notch here to fit that in place. I'm not wild about doing that. I do want the 5-speed, but you know, I'm a little concerned about cutting into the frame, especially the main member here cutting across. But I wouldn't be the first to do it, and most people seem to be happy with it. There is some talk about you know, being able to push the engine far enough on the mounts to clear this member. That remains to be seen. I'll see what I can do about that. So yeah, all this is going to be repainted black. The battery box, if you're familiar with these cars, you know that this is not original. So they had two 6-volt batteries, and this was the size profile of those batteries. And so whoever had the car before wanted to put a larger 12-volt. So that's actually being used as a storage container. And then the 12-volt goes back in there. Some shoddy work back there, so I want to get that cleaned up. But largely speaking, these panels are all in pretty good shape, just surface rust. Let's see here. Yeah, so you get an idea of what's going on in here. The box that was in the back was incorrect. Talking about the actual wood box, it's got the vinyl on it. I think it's vinyl. I'll have to go back and look, but the wood box in the back here, I need to do that correctly, so I'll end up rebuilding that. That's a ways off. You know, one thing to note, this piping here, it's supposed to be the body color of the car, so I need to make sure it's the right size too. I think I'm just probably go ahead and replace that. So that's something I need to look into. Oh, here's something I forgot to mention. Wheels. I think they were 54 spokes. Don't quote me on that. I'd have to go back and look, but and I don't remember the day that they shipped from the factory with the chrome wire wheels. But generally speaking, these were painted the color of the car. So I do have an original set of 54 spokes. I'm gonna go ahead and have painted the body color, but I just love the way the chrome looks. So I think unless I'm putting it in a show or something, I'll probably have the chrome on the majority of the time. Another important thing to note is that the majority of this car is steel, but there are some aluminum parts. The bonnet is aluminum, the doors are aluminum, and the boot is aluminum. So when you're stripping the paint off of this, you have to be really careful with sandblasting. You have to use the right medium. If you hold it for too long on the aluminum, it can warp it. So make sure you're cognizant of that when you're doing when you're stripping the car. Otherwise, you could damage it beyond repair. So that's just something to be aware of. And those parts right now are in storage. I'm going to pick them up when the body guy comes to get the car. But so yeah, that's about it. Really excited to get this car off to paint and body. I think it's going to look fantastic when it's done. Next step for me, when I get the short block back, I can start putting the engine back together. So the next video I post will probably start that process of the engine reassembly. I think it's going to be a great looking car when it's done. So trying to keep filming the progress as much as I possibly can. I'm not going to be able to catch every little detail, obviously. That'd be too long and boring. But I'll focus on some of the highlights, some of the things that I think are worth being out there as far as knowledge. And yeah, I really appreciate everyone tuning in. Thanks.